Cultures collided at a cosmopolitan occasion at the Newcastle City Hall today. Players from the Japanese national side and a touring team of Sioux Indian youngsters were given a civic welcome by Lord Mayor John McNaughton. The Japanese have yet to become a real force in world basketball, but they have outgrown the small man stereotype. Witness centre Yamazaki, who towers over Newcastle's own Skylab, Neil Turner.
They've got a 7-footer, and so that would be interesting for the people to see. You don't realize that there are tall Japanese. They have a couple of 6'7" guys, so 3 players on the team that are over 2 meters. So they're not that small actually, but they do have a few small, quick ones as well.
The Sioux contingent made for some colourful entries in the Civic Guest Book, and the word is their awesome natural talent may soon see some of their number make a name for themselves in the big time. It was a nice piece of diplomacy, but all that will change later tonight when the Falcons start concentrating on another kind of dunking.
On the face of it, things look pretty good on the land. 2 weeks ago, this paddock at Singleton was a dust bowl. But farmers are still forced to hand feed their stock. The rush of new pasture is only centimetres high and low on nutritional value.
It's more or less, it's just like water, and it runs straight through.
The hunter has received perfect falls in the last 2 weeks, ranging from 100 millimetres on the coast to 90 at Tocal, 100 plus at Gloucester, above 50 at Singleton and Merriwa. The ground has been soaked and dams filled. Added to that good rainfall, conditions have been unusually mild for wintertime. Soil temperatures have stayed around 17 degrees, and that's still warm enough for some pasture growth. Meanwhile, thousands of bales of hay are still being brought into the area, and local weeds inspectors are on full alert.
Some of that hay and grain could well be infested with noxious plants which are not currently in the district, and they can then spread it throughout their properties.
Farmers are advised on bringing in hay to feed it only in restricted areas, keeping any potential spread of noxious weeds to a minimum. While the break in the weather has brought hope, the hunter is still drought declared along with 60% of the state. According to the Department of Agriculture, property owners who have spent money improving their pastures could be out of trouble, but farmers who have left their country untouched will face a long battle yet.
The best we can have is that we'd have a normal winter, and that's always short of feed. But for most people, they're still going to be things will be very tight for the next few months.
A small crowd saw Japan open well, racing to a 6-point lead. The Falcons rested James Bullock and Neil Turner took on the role of defensive key man. He did a super job on Japan's Skylab Akifumi Yamasaki. But the man who inspired the Falcons was new boy Troy Trevelyan. From there on it rained points, the Falcons leading by 12 at quarter time and Grant Kruger giving Ryuji Tanaka a giant headache. 21 points ahead at half-time, it was a chance for the Falcons to find their range, while Turner continued to defy the tourists. 98-65 at the last change, and it was the Trevelyan show. And the younger players responded to the teamwork intensity in fine fashion. And it was no wonder that Trevelyan was pleased with the performance.
Yeah, that was a pretty good homecoming for me, and the guys played real hard, and I'm looking forward to being in Newcastle for quite a long time.
For the first time in weeks, even the coach was gloating. Back to reality, Geelong tomorrow night is a huge hurdle to jump.
It's going to be a very exciting contest, and Mike Johnson looked like he's turned the corner again. He shot 1 or 2 from the stand, so it's encouraging. You take a win against anybody, we'd beat up on the girl guides at the moment.
Most of the produce sold at the Sandgate market at the moment comes from Queensland, where dry weather, irrigation and a lack of seasonal problems like hail and frost have meant overproduction.
We've had beautiful growing conditions, we've had warm weather and we've had warm ground temperatures, and this has produced bumper crops.
50-kilogram bags of potatoes have been selling for as little as $15. 12 months ago they'd have brought $60. Tomatoes from Bundaberg hardly cover the transport and packaging costs, so some growers leave them to rot.
All across the board, we're talking about the staple sort of items that consumers buy, and everything other than potatoes have never been as cheap as what they are at the moment.
These cauliflower from the Maitland district are going right back where they came from. Bringing only 30 cents each, they are better value to the grower as cow feed. And fruiterers are also feeling the pinch. Compounding the oversupply problem, when economic times are tough, people regard fruit as a luxury and stop buying.
It makes it hard because your bills that come in each week are still the same, but you're not getting the margins that you should do.
The Sandgate market is a $100 million a year business, serving an area from Gosford to Coffs Harbour. Secretary-Manager Peter Holmes can see no immediate change to the marketing situation.
As we enter round 12 of the Winfield Cup, an amazing set of statistics presents itself in relation to the Knights. Last season at this point in the competition, the Knights were in 10th position on the ladder with 11 points, and this year it's exactly the same. In 1990, the Knights made their charge towards the playoff by belting St George 32-10 at the ISC. With a gutsy 1-point win over Manly last Sunday, there's a glimmer of hope at the end of the race.
It's going to be a hard game. Every game's hard, you know, and maybe it was the turning point beating Manly. We'll just have to go out there this Sunday and do the best we can do and, you know, try and come up with the 2 points again.
For the timber worker, this match holds special significance. Against the Dragons in 1990, Carter ended up with his jaw wide and struggled to regain form. To date in 91, Carter has spent most of his time in reserve grade, and last week was his first match in the top grade, and he found it a bit tough.
Reserve grade and first grade, there's quite a bit of difference with the pace. But, you know, I racked up a few tackles and it sort of tired me out pretty quick. So, yeah, I was sort of in a way happy to come off, but, you know, I'd like to have stayed on there for a bit longer.
The nuggety hooker played well against the Sea Eagles, well enough to convince the selectors to stick with him. But as Scott acknowledges, the pressure is on him to retain his spot.
Well, I've had Tony Townsend and Bugsy and Robbie and everyone else they're throwing in hooker, Butsy. So, you know, I've just got to hang in there and keep playing as best I can and try and keep holding my first grade spot.
It is generally known that drinking and driving is dangerous. But what about drinking and walking?
Well, it all depends. Again, it all depends how much he's had to drink and how far he's got to go.
If you walk on the right side of the road, you're right.
In the last 3 years, a staggering 417 pedestrians were killed or injured on Newcastle roads. In many cases, alcohol was blamed.
They have a loss of vision, or they have an impaired vision, they have slower reaction times, and these things combined often can lead to a disastrous situation.
The Roads and Traffic Authority has launched a campaign to make drivers and pedestrians aware of the dangers.
When pedestrians have been drinking, they can be unpredictable. 1 in 3 adult pedestrians killed is affected by alcohol. If you're driving near hotels, clubs, restaurants or sports grounds, take special care. The horror of being involved in a fatal accident never leaves you.
We'd suggest that people wear light clothing, that they stick to footpaths and specially marked pedestrian areas. They cross at lights. If you have a friend who's had a few drinks, look after that person, make sure that they get home safely.
The RTA hopes this campaign will reduce the number of fatalities on our roads. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Ask Central Coast people whether their home is just another part of Sydney and you're sure to get a lively response.
No, I don't think yet, but I can see it happening in 5 years.
No,
it's
the greatest place in the world.
Yeah, it is too. It's a great place to live.
That's why we moved up here from Sydney to the Central Coast.
It's this fear of the urban sprawl that's forced the Gosford City Council to renege on a deal it had made with former Minister for Planning, David Hay.
We had asked to be exempted from the actual plan, but to look at areas where medium density housing might be appropriate.
Approval of the scheme would have seen up to 3 houses squeezed onto an average block of land, but the message from the people was clear: not in my backyard.
They're objecting to it because they believe that in the future that will be the foundation of a slum type development.
The Department of Planning has yet to be advised of the decision, so it's not known what its reaction will be.
This 292-hectare parcel of bushland off George Booth Drive will be transformed into what ICI calls a mining services technology park. The development will be home for ICI's mining services operations in Australia and Southeast Asia. It will carry out explosives research and testing and will, in the early stages, employ mainly scientists transferred from Melbourne. Cessnock Mayor Marie Callaghan welcomes the development.
It's great to see Cessnock again be a part of the coal mining industry, in that the research and development carried out at ICI will result in coal being produced at lower rates and increasing Australia's export income.
The council last night amended the land's rural zoning to make way for the development. Although the development approval is subject to 78 conditions, some Curry residents remain fearful that the explosives facilities could bring equally volatile problems.
There could possibly be the 1 in 100 year accident that we're hearing about on a daily basis in industry, where the waterways could be polluted, the air fouled, or the flora and fauna killed out there.
Mayor Callaghan says those fears are unfounded.
Instruments were checked and the audience assembled. Moonlight Serenade was the theme song of the Glenn Miller Big Band, and 5 of the original members were on stage this afternoon. Trumpet player Zek Zaki was the Master Sergeant of Miller's Army Air Force Band. He was also the last member to speak with Glenn Miller before he tragically died in a plane crash.
Well, it affected us all very deeply after a while, because it didn't really sink in. We expected him to walk in the door any minute. And it was quite a shock when it finally dawned on us.
Meanwhile, a new generation of musicians took the stage at the Newcastle City Hall for the Regional Band Championships. A record 17 bands took part, and the Holroyd Band won the brass section.
The Knights have been struggling to find form and up until half-time against St George yesterday gave their fans something to cheer about. Scorched by some speedy Dragons wing play in the opening minutes of the game, Knights Michael Hagan and Mark Sargent combined to give John Schuster a burst at the line. The forwards kept up the pressure on St George, but the Knights' points all belonged to Schuster. A rapid succession of Dragons tries led to a boil-over on the scoreboard. With only 10 matches left in the Winfield Cup, the Knights are walking a tightrope to oblivion.
We just need to get that balance and get that going and get us working as a team probably a little bit more.
While he concedes it would be difficult, Hagan hasn't given up on the team making the final 5.
Well, I think you can probably afford to lose 2 more, but against such good teams in the Winfield Cup to string, a lot of wins together, as we've seen in recent weeks, it's very difficult. But we've done it before, and I'd like to think that if a bit of luck goes our way, we could do it again.
Junior rugby league potential was recognised by the Knights development officers today. 8 talented local youngsters received financial incentive from the club to help with expenses while scaling the ladder of state and national under-15 and open team selection. The boys have already distinguished themselves at local club and school level competition and are seen as a good investment by selectors to one day pull on the red and blue for Newcastle.
The Belmont police vessel stationed on Lake Macquarie is 11 years old and is showing its age. According to the patrol commander for Belmont, Chief Inspector Max Ebrell, it's time for a replacement.
We feel that it is now appropriate to get a new launch and have that resource replaced. Obviously, there are restrictions on resource use when the resource is ageing.
Police were unable to assist a boat in trouble off Swansea Heads on Saturday night. Although their launch Belmont is officially in commission, a bearing has worn in one of the engines and police consider the boat unreliable.
The officer in charge of the matter at the particular time at Belmont, in consideration of all the facts, including that the bearing in one of the motors in launch Belmont is wearing, didn't feel that it was appropriate to respond to that particular job at that time.
The rescue was successfully carried out by a member of the Royal Volunteer Coastal Patrol. An application for a new 7-metre catamaran is being considered by the Northern Region's Police Commander. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The company faced 7 charges in the Land and Environment Court over allegations it had breached its pollution control licence between February and April last year. The State Pollution Control Commission told the court 7 times the legal amount of cyanide and manganese, 2.5 times the amount of lead, and 7.5 times the amount of non-filterable residues were discharged into the Hunter River. The SPCC said the substances reached the south arm of the river through drains. PHP maintains there's no direct proof it is responsible, but Justice Stein told the court each offence was proven beyond reasonable doubt. He adjourned his decision on penalties until August the 1st.
Veterinarian Jeff Dutton was in surgery at the RSPCA shelter today, putting his skills to work helping animals. But yesterday those skills were put to another use, finding the cause of death of a victim of animal cruelty. The pit bull terrier was found chained to a telegraph post on Beach Road, Belmont South.
Well, initially it would have had a large gash to the head which penetrated into the skull. This would have caused a large amount of blood loss, which at the time before it died it was breathing that blood in, and then due to blood loss plus blood into the lungs, it would have died.
Any idea what was used?
Looking at the extent of injury, an axe or something similar.
The RSPCA hasn't found the dog's owner, but vets have kept the chain and collar in the hope that someone will recognise them. It's feared that controversies surrounding pit bull terriers and other large breeds, especially in the UK where their control is the source of heated debate, may be behind the brutal act. But there may be a more sinister motive for the dog's death. The RSPCA won't rule out that it's linked to illegal dog fights, and they say there's plenty of evidence that these are being conducted in the Hunter right now. Large dogs are keenly sought by organisers of these fights, and the RSPCA is convinced that domestic pets are regularly stolen to supply this cruel sport.
There's a lot of circumstantial evidence, a lot of certain types of dogs going missing, and we get people coming in that a person that loves a certain type of breed, and it's the third dog that's been stolen.
The RSPCA believes that because many owners don't report the theft of their dogs, the problem may be even more widespread. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
This is the stuff that Cinderella's nightmares are made of. The City Hall clock, stuck at 12. Not that everyone seems to be a clock watcher. Do you rely on this clock?
Well, I've never really taken any notice of it.
Nah, never.
Sometimes when you're crossing through the park and you're having lunch or something, you look up and see what time it is. If it's not working, you don't know really, do you?
We did about 3 hours ago, but it really was around 12 o'clock then after we just finished an exam at uni.
Last week, gremlins got into the 61-year-old clock's wiring, sending it cuckoo. Workers are repairing the clock, but with 200 metres of cable to inspect, it takes time to restore time. No one knows how temperamental the clock can be better than Bob Bagnall. Every day for more than 20 years, Bob's climbed these spiralling stairs to fine-tune the clock and smooth over its moody nature.
Yeah, the weather affects it a lot too, the rain and the wind on the outside of the hands affect it, so yeah, it's very temperamental. Yeah.
On the face of it, it seems as though time has stood still for the City Hall clock, but as the Council's Electrical Services Supervisor, Peter Dormand, explains, Old Father Time is even marching on for this Newcastle landmark.
We're going to put in an encoder, which is an electronic device, which will allow us to monitor the exact location at any time where the hands are on the outside. Through a microprocessor, it will be able to actually add or subtract movement.
Mr. Dormand says the hands of time should begin revolving again within the next day or two. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
It's crunch time for Maitland City Council. A report by the Department of Local Government alleges that Council's short and long-term financial situation is unsatisfactory. Mayor Ray Fairweather agrees. Council must do something to improve its performance. A corporate management plan is to be devised to guide Council during the next 3 years, but the pruning is to begin straight away. Council now pays its employees $12 a week above the award wage. That's costing around $180,000 more each year. Staffing is one area where the fat will have to be trimmed.
There definitely will be cuts, but we're hoping that any reduction will be way of natural attrition. We don't expect to have to go into a redundancy situation.
Also under the microscope will be the operations of each department. According to the report, Council is spending 117% more than other councils on dog control and 7% more on administration. And these are just two examples. According to the Mayor, Council's financial situation is so tight that there is no money to replace broken down or worn out equipment. In fact, the $150,000 allocated for plant replacement in this year's budget has been scrapped. Instead, that money has to go towards staff wages.
A lot of our equipment out there is very ancient. It takes a lot of maintenance to keep them on the road, and that is a cost factor too we have to look at.
But the Mayor is adamant services to ratepayers won't be affected, and he guarantees they won't suffer because of Council's mismanagement.
I don't see any increases in over and above the allowed increase by the government. I think that it's a situation that has to be looked internally, better management and better way we do things.
Jodie McKay, NBN News.